All right, so we want to simplify this expression. We have the square root of 36 times x raised to the power of 5 times y times z raised to the power of 8. So in order to simplify this, we're going to first start by breaking this big expression down into smaller pieces. So let's take a look at each term individually. We have 36, then we have x raised to the power of 5, then we have y by itself, and then we have that z raised to the power of 8. So we have that. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it a step further and bring each term down and put that square root around each term individually. So we have the square root of 36, then we have the square root of x raised to the power of 5 times the square root of y times the square root of z raised to the power of 8. All right, so we're going to start by looking at this first term, the square root of 36, and we're just going to solve that. So if I go ahead and underline that once again with my red marker, if we simplify or solve for the square root of 36, we need to decide what number times itself gives us 36. And we know that that is 6. 6 times 6 is 36, so the square root of 36 is 6. Great, we have that. Now we're going to move on to this term. We have the square root of x raised to the power of 5. So what we're going to do is we're going to rewrite this as the square root of x raised to the power of 4 times the square root of x. And you can include that 1, or you can just imagine it's there. You don't have to necessarily write that in if you don't want to. So if we remember that all of our exponent rules actually made a lesson about that, so you can definitely go check that out. I'll leave that in the description box below. But according to our laws of exponents, whenever we are multiplying two terms with the same base, we add the exponents together. So these two expressions are equivalent because the square root of x, or if we just look at x raised to the power of 4 times x raised to the power of 1, that is equivalent to x raised to the power of 5. And then of course we have both of these expressions square rooted. So these are the same, but then if we take that a step further and we break this down even more, we could rewrite this as, one second, let's see, x, or the square root of x raised to the power of 4 times the square root of just x. So if we look at this first term, after breaking up this expression over here into two parts, we have the square root of x raised to the power of 4. And so I'm going to underline that once again in red and draw my little arrow. And so if we simplify that term, so the square root of x raised to the power of 4, we know that is x squared. So that would be our simplified expression or simplified answer for this first part. And if we look at this second part where we have just the square root of x, we can't really simplify that any further. So we would just leave that as the square root of x. So that's that for this first or this second term. Now we can move on over here to y. Or rather the square root of y. And again, similar to what we had over here with the square root of x, we can't really simplify that any further. So we would just leave that as the square root of y. So I'm just going to underline that in red, and I'll leave that as it is. Then we move on to our fourth term, which is our last term. We have the square root of z raised to the power of 8. And so once again, with this exponent, similar to what we had over here where we broke it up, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to do the same thing in regards to following the laws of exponents. So we have the square root of z raised to the power of 8. And so we're going to rewrite this as z. We want to keep our bases the same. Z raised to the power of 4 times z raised to the power of 4. Now, this works because, once again, according to the laws of exponents, as long as we have the same base when we're multiplying two terms with exponents, that is the same thing as adding the exponent. So that's what makes these two expressions equivalent. So now we are going to go ahead and take it a step further. And when we write this as two separate expressions, so or radicals, so the square root of z raised to the power of 4 times the square root of z raised to the power of 4, and we simplify them both individually. Similar to here, we had x, the square root of x raised to the power of 4, and we got x squared. We're going to get a similar answer. So the square root of z raised to the power of 4 is just z squared. And so we'll do the same thing over here where we have our z squared. And so now we have our simplified expressions for each term. So for 36, or the square root of 36, we have 6. So I'm going to circle that in green. And then for the square root of x raised to the power of 5, we have this right here, x squared times the square root of x. And then for y, or the square root of y, we know that that's just going to be left as the square root of y, so I can circle that in. And then for our last term, which was the square root of z raised to the power of 8, we get z squared times z squared, which we could actually simplify or rewrite as just, when we do that, so once again, following our rules of exponents. So we have the same base. I'm just gonna write that over here, our base of z, and then we add our exponents. 2 plus 2 is 4, and so that would be our simplified expression. So once again, for the square root of z raised to the power of 8, we get z raised to the power of 4 as our simplified expression. And so that's what we have, this, and this. And now we can just condense this into our final answer. All right, so now that we have simplified each expression in this radical, starting with radical 36, this, and this, and we've gotten basically all the terms in green, we are now going to condense this and write this as our final answer. So for our final answer, or first of all, as you can see over here, we have some numbers or terms that will be written without the radical, and then some with our radical or our square root. So everything in our square root will come second, and everything out of our square root will come first. So in other words, we would write our final answer as, let's see, so if we start with the first term, we have 6, and then we have, I wrote x to the power of 4. I meant z to the power of 4. That's important. Okay, so we have 6, our first term, times, let's see, x squared, And then our next term that's outside of the radical, doesn't have the square root, is our z to the power of 4. Sorry, z to the power of 4. And then we'll do our radical expression. And we only have 2 terms under the radical, which is x and y. So this will be our final answer. 6 times x to the square, or 6 times x squared times z to the power of 4 times the square root of x, y. So I hope this video helped with simplifying large radical expressions, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye, and thanks for watching.
Wait, before you leave, go ahead and check out these lessons up above. You can watch this lesson, or you can watch that one, or you can watch both. Oh, and while you're at it, please do me a huge favor and subscribe to my YouTube channel. You can do so by clicking out of this video and hitting the subscribe button. Thank you so much. Bye.